Hey guys, another episode of Vikings Happy Hour. We got Will Ragatz here from Sports Illustrated. We're talking Kevin O'Connell presser from last week, impending Vikings free agents, and then some new news this evening. Kevin O'Connell's take on Kirk Cousins as QB1. We're going to dissect it all here on Vikings Happy Hour tonight. So grab your drink and let's start the show.
Welcome to Vikings Happy Hour, where we mix our favorite beverage and talk of your Minnesota Vikings.
You do. You have.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Vikings Happy Hour. My name's Matt Anderson. I'm your host. I feel like Dr. Evil tonight. I got my cat sitting in my lap. Joined by Myles and Ryan, and we are all joined by special guest Will Ragatz of Sports Illustrated, kind enough to join us this offseason amidst a pretty busy offseason for you as well. I know. Originally we had planned to have you last week. Some things shifted around, but we're glad we got you back this week. So, Will, how are you? What are you drinking? What's new? I know we've talked in between that, but it's been about a year since you've been on the show. So, how are you?
I'm good. Just enjoying the offseason. Got my spotted cow here. A little bit, perhaps controversial, a Wisconsin beer, but it's quite good. And I drove back from Chicago today, so I stopped in Wisconsin and grabbed some. But yeah, I'm good. I'm kind of glad everything's wrapped up with the coaching search and the GM search, and now we can. It was a fun period to discuss and dissect, and I think the Vikings made two strong hires, and now we're diving into the real offseason with the combine coming up and free agency, the draft, all that. So it's fun.
So before we get into how Myles and Ryan are doing this evening, I want to ask you just right off the bat here before it becomes old news, right? Kevin O'Connell was introduced as head coach last week. You were at the press conference. I saw your question. You had the little spotlight camera on you for a hot second there when you asked your question. What were your takeaways from last week? Can we take anything away from those types of press conferences as fans? And then I understand that maybe there was some media, like some private media interviews as well after that press conference. Is there anything you can give us from there?
Yeah, I think those press conferences are kind of just cool for fans to just ramp up the excitement level. And you've heard about the guy, and now you hear from him and kind of get some of his ideas on philosophies and the roster and things like that. I don't think you can really have any huge concrete takeaways because they're kind of just they're saying what they're gonna say. That's not to say that either O'Connell or Kwesi gave bad coach speak answers. I thought they were very interesting and informative, but it's still hard to say anything definitive from what they said. The thing I'll say is that they both came off really, really well from those press conferences, and that doesn't mean anything in the grand scheme of winning football games, but when the Wolves set out to find people who are going to be collaborative and good leaders and good communicators, every indication is they found two people who are going to be good at that and who are going to bridge some gaps that may have been created in the later years of the Zimmer Spielman era, and kind of make everybody's voices heard and be on the same page with everything. And so I think that alone is exciting, and two young guys with lots of different ideas and different perspectives, and they really went the opposite direction from both Spielman and Zimmer. So that's kind of naturally what happens. But I think it's an exciting time for Vikings fans with just all the possibilities out there.
Yeah, and we're going to get to probably the first part of the Vikings offseason, which is talking about our own free agents tonight. But before we get to that point, I'd be remiss if I didn't give Myles and Ryan a chance to at least show their presence here this evening. So we'll start with you, Myles. I know we met last weekend at Surly, so I don't know if you have anything on the docket to drink tonight, but if you don't,
I
that's
do.
fine.
I
But
do
how are you
actually.
doing? nonetheless.
I'm good.
Okay.
I'm good. I normally don't drink on your show too often. But I have it's like a peanut butter whiskey
Okay. Oh,
with cream soda.
okay.
I saw someone online. Someone online said it's supposed to taste like a butter beer from like like Harry Potter, like Disney World. And I was like, oh, let me try that. I was like, I have that at my house, so I tried it. It's not bad. I don't know if I think I have too big of a glass, but oh well, it'll be all right. I'm not gonna turn into Ryan, but it's still pretty good.
Well, speaking of Ryan here, I'm sure he's probably 2 glasses deep. It's only 8:08 as we record this, but Ryan, how are you on this fine Wednesday evening?
I'm great. Still reminiscing about the Surly days that we had this last weekend. And so I'm drinking some more Grapefruit Supreme because I couldn't get enough that night. And then I got some Basil Hayden toast in case I need to get a little more swirly. We'll see. We'll see how the night goes.
We missed a prime opportunity last weekend. For those who don't know, Eric Eager was in town from Pro Football Focus, as was Phil Mackey from Score North. And so, Will, I should have shot you a message to see if you were in town. It would have been a fun time to kind of have you pop over to Surly. But next time around, I will not forget. I will make sure to send that message to you to get you out there. And
Yeah,
we'll
let me know. I'm a big fan of Surly. Pizza is phenomenal over there, and the beer, of course.
I did get a free pizza certificate because I stayed there so long.
Oh, nice.
So we can all go back and share one.
They couldn't kick you out, so
We'll
they're
do
like, that's the only way they can get you out of there.
Well, to be honest, they gave me more coupons the next night when I showed up than the first night. So I don't think they ever want me to leave. Dave, I know you're not out here right now, but do you have any drink in hand?
Yes,
this
I am
evening?
trying Devil's Cut Jim Beam bourbon.
Oh yeah, sure.
It's interesting.
I'm glad there's some beer on the show finally because I was talking with one of my buddies and he's like, yeah, you guys used to have beer all the time, and now I feel like all you guys drink is hard liquor. So Will's representing us with the Spotted Cow, and Myles has got some like Harry Potter butter beer. I'm gonna call it that. And then Ryan over there as well. So getting the beer back in the loop. We're getting warmer in these months, so it's gonna be a fun one. So
We just had like a
before we get
snowstorm.
to,
What do you mean it's getting warmer?
I mean, March is right around the corner. We are bound to get a 50-degree day here in Minnesota, right? Or am I wrong?
That's fair. You're probably right, and then it'll drop back down to like -3. But yeah.
Yeah, it'll be all over the place.
So I don't know. I think he's asking you a question in the chat. I'm trying to read it quick. Will, do you have the same opinion that Vikings beat writers Collar, Cronin, Ekstrom, that Kellen Mond is just bad, and will never become a starter or second string? Do you want to answer that, or do you want to proceed with the normal show? I'll leave it up to you for a second.
We can get to that quickly. I mean, I'll say it's hard to know. We haven't seen much of Kellen Mond. I thought he looked pretty good in that third preseason game against the Chiefs and showed a little bit, but clearly then did not do enough throughout the year to really get any opportunities. Although I don't know how much of that was Kellen Mond. I don't know if that was Mike Zimmer just not liking Kellen Mond for whatever reason. The one pass or two he threw at Lambeau Field late in that game did not go great. But I think it's too early to write off Kellen Mond from at least becoming a solid backup. I don't think there's much to suggest that he's got like future Pro Bowl upside, but you never know. I'm curious to see with Kevin O'Connell, and then also with the quarterbacks coach they brought in, Chris O'Hara, I believe, the assistant quarterbacks coach, Gerard Johnson, who's got a good pedigree of developing young quarterbacks. He played at Texas A&M, and then Kellen Mond broke a bunch of his records. So I think that'll be a great. I think this will be a much better situation this year for Kellen Mond, and if we don't see a little bit of something, then you can probably write that off as a whiff of a third round pick.
That's a fair assessment. I think everybody on this show agrees with that. Uh, as we look through the offseason here, one focal point, which is going to be whether we like it or not, is going to be a conversation topic every single week, is going to be Kirk Cousins. Until he leaves, until he
Who?
signs an extension.
Kirk Cousins?
Yeah, do you know who that guy is, by the way? Have you heard about him?
Mhm.
Uh,
Real up and
questionable
comer.
as
I heard he's a real up and comer in the league.
well, it's
Yeah, I
questionable
think
whether or not he's QB1.
He's developing pretty well.
yeah, I think they're
Somebody's going to unlock that potential.
completely
someday.
change who he is at 34 years old. Exactly.
Well, Will, did you get a
turns
chance?
34 in August.
Did you get a chance to listen to the interview with Kevin O'Connell from WCCO Radio this evening?
Yeah, I saw the clip that was going around on Twitter. I don't think there's too much to read into it. I guess it was an interesting answer the way it was phrased, that training camp is a long ways away for any position, and I mean that's true. Yeah, I don't know. I've written a bunch about Cousins, and it's gonna keep being the hot topic every day until some decision happens. But all I'll say for now is that I don't think anything should be considered off the table. Like, if the Vikings were to get an offer that they couldn't refuse, I think they would probably take it. And if Cousins, as reported, doesn't want to take a pay cut or anything like that, and the price on an extension is going to be too high, that's something they have to consider too. I mean, I think Kirk Cousins is probably going to be the quarterback, just because that's the most obvious option, and there really isn't a clear replacement. But I would say it's still very early in the offseason, and anything could happen, which is the exciting part of it all.
Can you say without any hesitation that when training camp begins, Kirk Cousins will be on this team and thus will be the number one quarterback when your team reports in July?
Well, phrasing it that way after saying that no matter what I answer will be greatly dissected, it sure is a heck of a way to ask the question. But I can tell you training camp is a long way away in my mind. From a standpoint of what any position may look like, having just gotten into the building recently. I do appreciate the question, but I think we got to look at things in a short-term way of just how we build this thing for what's going to come during the season. And in training camp, obviously, will be a huge part of that as we build towards that first football game. I love Kirk Cousins. I do. I think the world of him as a player. I think he's clearly shown in this league the skill set, the intangibles at the quarterback position to play at a high level, to go right along with a skill set, like I said, that creates opportunities for all his teammates around him to play at a high level. I think he's got great experience and durability to be on the field and available week in and week out in this league. I think you cannot discount that. And in the end, I'm just excited to see the type of offense and the type of advantages we can provide for Kirk to help him play at the highest possible level he can. And that really goes for all of our.
So, first off, I can't help but notice media members trying to stump a first-time head coach into saying something. And so kudos to Kevin O'Connell for somehow dodging these questions within the first week of being head coach. He's done a great job. Myles, what are your thoughts on Kevin O'Connell and what he just said about Kirk Cousins as being QB1 heading into training camp?
I mean, I think it's just like his press conference last week. I wouldn't read too much into what's being said right now. I think everything that's being said is methodically, Kevin O'Connell didn't go into that interview with WCCO unprepared. So maybe he was thrown off guard by the phrasing, but he has talking points to hit and certain areas to discuss and how to discuss them. Kirk Cousins obviously being one of them. I think one thing we know, like what Will has said, all options seem to be on the table. Now, that doesn't mean any definitive decision's been made, but I think one thing that I think people need to realize too is it's not just the Vikings that need to decide whether Kirk Cousins is going to be here. Kirk Cousins also kind of has to make that decision for himself as well, because we've talked about, I can guarantee both sides would like to get an extension done. Now, what that number looks like for an extension, I'm assuming they're completely off base, because if they were aligned with what an extension would look like, they'd probably have one in place by now. But or at least it'd be close to having one done. Not to say it can't still happen, but I feel like that'd be the first domino they want to get done as quickly as they can. So does Kirk also want to be here? And I say that because not that he doesn't want to be here, but what we know about Kirk Cousins, he's kind of treating the Vikings similar to what he did in Washington. This year is essentially like a franchise tag for him. He's playing on a 1-year deal. He gets to hit the open market next year, or God forbid the Vikings were to franchise tag him at like $63 million, or whatever that number would be, which isn't going to happen. So Kirk holds all the cards in similarly what he wants to do. And if he truly does, like we've seen him do, want to maximize his dollar in a business standpoint, hitting the open market might be his best opportunity. Like even O'Connell even mentioned in the interview, he's a guy that stays on the field. He doesn't get hurt. He's an efficient quarterback. You know what you're getting from a guy like him, even at the age of 34. The injuries aren't a concern. So like those types of things. And he's a good quarterback. And so his ability, this could be his last potential like big payday. For him to want to maximize that opportunity, hitting the open market's the best way to do that, because a team wouldn't have to trade for him. A team could just sign him to a new contract, and he has a little bit more control of where to go and what that number looks like heading into the negotiation period. And what he could do in that situation then is reposition himself back to the Vikings to say, hey, I'm getting offered this on the open market. Are you even willing to come to this number? So it's just and the cap is continuing to go up beyond, obviously with COVID the last couple of years, it's been suppressed. So the cap's going to go spike significantly. So Kirk and his agent know that. So they're going to negotiate off of those numbers. So if the Vikings aren't willing to go to a number that Kirk's looking for, I think reports are out there like 40 plus base salary, that type of thing. We know he likes a short-term contract. The Vikings shouldn't force themselves into a situation where they feel that they have to sign him to an extension just to lower a cap hit for 2022, because it's got to be about the long-term play and creating long-term flexibility for yourselves, not just focusing on, well, how do we get under the cap now? Because there are other ways to get under the cap other than just Kirk Cousins. So that you didn't ask that question, but it's kind of where I'm feeling. I just want people to like look at it from not just the Vikings side. It's not just a Vikings decision. Like the Vikings, I'm sure, like Will said, if they got an offer that they couldn't refuse, they'd probably consider trading him, because if they can't get an extension done, then that means he's on a 1-year deal, likely to hit the open market, and you're not going to get him back because he's going to overprice him. He's going to outprice himself then. So if you can get ahead of that, why not? So there's a little bit of that. And so I just like to look at multiple angles, and it's not just a one size fits all, or just looking at it from the Viking side, because as fans, it's easy to look at just, oh, the Vikings need to do this. Well, there's other areas that you have to consider in this situation too.
Very good point.
It's not just,
absolutely.
It's not just Cousins and the Vikings. It's like the other teams too. There's a lot of teams out there that need a quarterback. So what's the first domino that's going to fall? Aaron Rodgers or Russell Wilson or whoever. And what does that, like, our teams late in the process, like the Browns or the Panthers or the Steelers, there's a bunch of them. Is somebody going to get desperate and talk themselves into trading for Kirk Cousins and signing him to an extension and giving up a lot of draft capital and taking on a lot of that salary to do so? And so there's a lot of factors that I think that the Vikings are right to kind of take a wait and see approach.
And I think you bring up a good point too, right? Because we heard about it with Judd Zulgad on Score North, and even Myles, you kind of told us about this as well. The Panthers called on Kirk Cousins this last week, and granted, it was very like non-formal, right? There weren't maybe trade talks talked about or discussed in that phone call, but we're heading into the busiest time of the NFL offseason. Rumors are going to be flying. Teams are exploring multiple different avenues for their team. So I'm with you there, Will, on the fact that, a team could sit here much like we do as fans in fantasy football, right? And we can talk ourselves into a player if we think that they can push us over the edge. And so a lot of GMs, a lot of head coaches around the league are sitting there evaluating their rosters and wondering, hey, is Kirk Cousins the missing piece? Maybe he is, and maybe they make that phone call, give the Vikings what they're asking for, and we're talking about Kirk on a different team, or it could be the other hand,
Well,
right? We
I
could see
mean,
Kirk
and
Cousins here still.
I mean, that was us in 2018, right? Like we didn't have a quarterback solidified, but we had a great team outside of that. And we needed one missing piece that ended up not being our missing piece, but maybe it'll be somebody else's. Um, quick shout out to the chat here. We have a lot of activity here. It seems like a lot of people are on our side, which is great. I mean, it's always good to kind of hear, people agree with us and what we're saying. One of my favorite comments here was Linda, just saying that we're just trying to pump up Kirk Cousins as much as we can to get, as much draft or a trade capital back in return for him, which would be great. That leads me to my next question. Well, you had mentioned now twice here, offer you can't refuse, right? In your humble opinion, obviously you're not the decision maker here, but what would that offer need to look like for you to seriously consider moving Kirk? I mean, are we talking a Stafford-like trade, or are we talking, like a Darnold type trade?
Yeah, I think maybe somewhere in between. The contract is kind of a complicating factor, so it's how much of that contract is the team that's trading for Cousins going to take on. And I think the more that they're taking on, the draft capital or the return, whatever it might be, you're getting back goes down. So if the Vikings aren't eating any of the salary beyond just the $10 million signing bonus, I don't know if you get a first. If you can give somebody to give you a first and take his entire contract, I think you have to strongly consider that. I mean, I think there might have to be.
Can I ask you a hypothetical?
There might have to be players coming back just to balance the salaries or whatnot. But it's interesting. Yeah, go ahead.
Would you take a second and a third round draft pick for Kirk Cousins? I only say that because it's brought up last weekend, and I said no. I'm first or bust on Kirk, but I'm curious your opinion there.
I think again, if you're not eating any salary and you're getting a second and third back, it would be tempting because then you've got a first, 2 seconds, and 2/3, which is ammo to move up and get somebody you like, whether that's a quarterback or somebody else. I mean, a lot of people talk about how this isn't a great quarterback draft, but I mean, to me, there's 6 guys that people have talked about as potential first round picks. Like, I think that the math suggests that 1 or 2 of those are going to pan out. So why not maybe take a swing on one if you like them, like what you see at the combine and pro day and things like that, or you sign a bridge guy or evaluate Kellen Mond and maybe draft a QB next year. I don't know what it's going to be, but it's an interesting hypothetical. I'm glad I'm not the one making the decision at the end of the day.
Well, I think a couple dominoes that we need to see fall first is obviously Aaron Rodgers and like Russell Wilson. Those are probably the 2 biggest outside of the Vikings. The QB dominoes got to be those 2. Like, are they traded? If they're, and Deshaun Watson to a degree, but I still don't think anything's going to happen there because of the legal situation. So Russell Wilson and Aaron Rodgers, the 2, and then Derek Carr, whether it's a contract extension or a trade, could be another piece that you potentially see as well. Because if he signs a new extension, he's essentially resetting he's the first person to reset the market in the new cap spike, as they expected cap spike coming. He'd be the first quarterback, I guess, in the Kirk Cousins range to hit a number. And so the Vikings are probably looking at that idea as well. I'm sure Kirk Cousins camp is exploring what that could look like as well. And then lastly, it's Jimmy Garoppolo. What do the 49ers do with Jimmy Garoppolo? Do they decide to trade him? Do they decide to keep him because they don't think Trey Lance is ready? Like, what does that all entail? And we haven't heard any dominoes fall from any of those scenarios. So if you're the Vikings, there's truly no rush because you do have Kirk under contract. They've probably already built and planned an idea around him being here on a 1-year contract if they have to. And like, they have all their scenarios played out, right? If we have to keep Kirk on a 1-year, $45 million cap hit, how do we function our cap around that? That's one bucket. If we trade Kirk, depending on the numbers and all that, we don't have to, but like if we trade Kirk, how do we maneuver the cap and the roster around that? And if we extend Kirk, so they have all these buckets lined up on how to function. Now it's deciding on and hearing what happens across the league first. And obviously the combine is going to be the first area where that's truly going to start kicking things off. So hopefully we should start hearing stuff in the next couple of weeks.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what Kwesi and O'Connell say next week, because they both have availability at the combine, which I'm going to for the first time ever, so I'm excited about that.
Let's go, Will.
Oh, that's dope.
Yeah.
Anything
Need me to come with?
you're looking forward to?
I'll take notes.
If I had a +1, you'd be right up there. No, I mean it's. I'm curious to just I don't know, talk to them again after like their first with Kwesi. It'll be like a month on the job, a month plus. O'Connell like only a week or two, but still just maybe what kind of progress has been made in terms of their internal discussions, to the extent that they'll share any of that, and how they're viewing this upcoming draft and some areas of need, and then just kind of seeing some of the big prospects out there doing their testing. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, it should be a fun time. We were talking with some other guys this past weekend. I know Thor Nystrom from NBC Sports Edge is heading out there as well. He'll be a guest on our show later this offseason. So I'm excited for you. I think that'll be super fun, and I know fans are going to be eager to hear kind of what you have to report back to us and what you're hearing and some of the work that you're doing. And speaking of some of the work that you're doing, this will transition into kind of our next topic of Vikings impending free agents. I know I have an article up here. I know recently you wrote something out on Sports Illustrated called "Assessing the Vikings Unrestricted Free Agents and If They Might Return in 2022." It was released yesterday. A lot of people on that list. It's a new regime, which means that there's a lot of new potential for change. And so if I don't want you to have to like regurgitate the whole article to us, but if you can give us some of the highlights, and then we can kind of talk about it amongst this group here, some kind of key free agents on whether or not we think they'd fit, now that we're switching to a 3-4 defense, as says O'Connell. There's obviously cap implications and a bunch of other things as well. So I'll let you take the lead here, but I think I'm ready to go this route.
Yeah, it's kind of strange the way the timing of the contracts works out. I was looking at the article I wrote last year about the free agents, and there were like 10 UFAs for the Vikings. Like Anthony Harris and Eric Wilson were like the two biggest ones. Obviously, neither of whom returned. But this year they have like 20 of them. A bunch of kind of smaller name guys who were maybe on 1-year deals or whatever. Just I think the way they loaded up on 1-year deals last offseason contributes to that number. But the two big ones that kind of stand above the rest in terms of not just like big name players, but the salary that they played at last year are Anthony Barr and Patrick Peterson, who both made like roughly $8 or $9 million last year. Barr was restructured last year, so his last couple of years of his contract were voided, and he's going to hit free agency. It's kind of always seemed like the writing's on the wall. Like Barr spoke after that Bears game, the regular season finale, and really seemed to be talking about his 8 years in Minnesota from a past tense perspective, although he obviously left the door open. But then Eric Kendricks talked to us the next day or the day after Spielman and Zimmer were let go, and got emotional talking about Barr and the kind of increasing likelihood that he might not be playing with him next year, because they've been playing together going back to UCLA. So it's kind of seemed like the writing was on the wall. So it was interesting when Kevin O'Connell at his introductory press conference mentioned Anthony Barr's name. I don't know if that was an intentional thing or if he was just kind of listing players who have been standouts in Minnesota in the past. But with the switch to a 3-4 with Ed Donatel, it would be ironic if Barr left this offseason right before the Vikings finally moved to a 3-4, which he played at in UCLA and was an outside linebacker. And I think a lot of people have thought for a while that role might fit his skill set better than being an off-ball linebacker in a 4-3, and just some of the ways that you could use him. So will they try to bring him back? I don't know. You've already got $10 million that you're paying him in dead money over the next 2 years. So to sign him on top of that would be a little pricey, especially because he's going to want to get paid. But I think the appeal of playing with Kendricks and Smith could be a big thing for Barr if he were to take like a slight team-friendly deal. I don't know. And then with Peterson, I thought he was just a great mentor for the Cameron Dantzlers and Chris Boyds of the world in his first year here. Didn't have a ton of splash plays, but also I don't think he got thrown at a ton because the guy across from him, whether it was Breland or Dantzler or Mackenzie Alexander, those guys all kind of had their struggles. So I thought Peterson was solid and consistent. He didn't get burnt a ton. I mean, he's not getting any younger, but I think bringing him back on a 1-year deal, depending on the price, could work out. So I think I would be more surprised to see Barr come back than Peterson for sure. But again, you never know. And then there's the secondary guys, like secondary, not playing in the secondary, but like the second tier of guys like Sheldon Richardson, Xavier Woods, Nick Vigil, Mackenzie Alexander, all kinds of people like that I'm sure we can dive into as well. But Barr and Peterson being the two big ones.
Yeah. Ryan, what are your thoughts on Anthony Barr and Patrick Peterson potentially returning to the Vikings? And I mean, Will brought up a great point, right? Like, we had Darren Wolfson on this show last November talk about Anthony Barr, and he said that, and I'll talk to him about this in a few weeks, but he told us on this show, no chance Anthony Barr returns as a Minnesota Viking. And I'm not saying it's going to happen 100%, but a 3-4 defense, like Will alluded to, kind of fits a guy like Anthony Barr. And so what are your thoughts about, Barr, Peterson, and we'll let Myles get into the rest of that crew afterwards.
Yeah. Speaking about Barr, right? I mean, obviously that's been our kind of goal or dream that we've wanted to see since he's been drafted is, he was highly touted for being able to get after the passer, be able to penetrate, these offensive lines and create some havoc in the backfield. And we never got to really realize that, right? I mean, they drew up some blitzes and stuff for him, which he was very effective doing that in the off-ball setting, but nothing on a consistent basis. So it would be interesting, obviously, to be able to hear him or to watch him do this. But the issue is the reason why he's not really being considered further is not necessarily because of the contract, but also it's because of his knees. Like he had a hard time staying healthy. They really consider his knees to be more of like a degenerative thing, right? Like it's not going to get better. It's just going to be managed from here on out. At least that's the word that we hear. Of course, we're not we're not doctors, we're not medical professionals, so we don't know for sure. But so that's the only thing that worries me. I mean, obviously Anthony Barr is, he's been a mainstay, right? I mean, he's been here since 2014, beloved by the fans, does great for the community. Obviously would love to keep him here if it was a good, team-friendly deal, protected us from those long-term injury issues. But at the same time, there's other players who do play in more of a 3-4 setting, outside linebacker, edge, whatever you want to call it. There's going to be some cap casualties. Obviously, one big name that people are kind of throwing out there is Zadarius Smith, right? Like a guy like him who's actually had time in that system in the last 6-7 years, who's been very effective in that system. So, I mean, I think there's other routes you could go to save some, or not save money necessarily, but better spend your money maybe, where you don't maybe necessarily have to worry about a knee issue. And obviously the main reason we're trying to even have this talking point is the nostalgia effect of like, he's our guy, he's been with us forever. That's not really the case anymore with this new regime. So I could definitely see him staying and would love to see it, just because of the nostalgia. But I don't think that it's probably in our best interest unless, like Will said, it's a very good team-friendly deal. As for Peterson, I agree with Will and everything he said there. He's a good leader. I think he coached or mentored these younger corners well. And I do think he played well. He didn't play lights out, but I think he'd be a solid like CB2. Now, we don't have a CB1, which is the issue. So it's not only would we be bringing him in, we'd have to probably bring in another individual to continue to compete at the cornerback position, either through the draft or free agency. But it would be not a bad choice, I don't think. I mean, I guess he's getting older and our scheme's changing, right? So he's traditionally been a man, cover man corner. Correct me if I'm wrong, guys. I'm sure you know a little better than I do, but I think Donatell typically more plays a off-man zone type coverage in his secondary. Again, I could be wrong there, but if I remember correctly, I thought that's what they played back out in Denver. So not saying he couldn't. That actually probably would better fit his skill set currently with him getting older and probably not being able to run stride for stride with some of these young guys anymore. But, it would be a different scheme that he probably hasn't played as much in the past. So, again, would definitely welcome either of these guys back at the right price. But, again, there's a lot of talent out there that could either be had for around the same price or maybe even a little bit more expensive, but maybe a little bit more effective and going forward. So, not a great answer, but I'd probably say move on and maybe try to get some younger people. But at the same time, if we brought him back, I wouldn't be angry about it at the right price.
And I think that's a fair take. Myles, are there any impending Viking free agents that you are maybe passionate about keeping? I know a lot of fans maybe thought Xavier Woods played well, but he's got Cam Bynum standing up behind him. And he's shaking his head no if you can't see it.
No,
you're not sitting on the table for anybody?
No, to be honest, I'm ready for like the new change. Because the one thing that we saw with the old regime was the constant, we have to keep our guys. You have to keep everybody in place no matter the cost. And I'm ready for the change. I'm ready. Like, let's let Donatell and that new defensive staff bring in the guys that they feel best fit their scheme and for the team. And if that's bringing in new blood, I'm all about it, because this idea of just continuously running it back, and the idea of just changing out the head coach and the GM and then running everything else back, to expect different results is just not, it's not a right mindset in my opinion. Like the team wasn't good enough last year. So why do we need to bring back a lot of those same players? It wasn't just the coaching staff. It was also the people that were playing. And so I just think at this point, it's a reset. So during a reset, it's okay to bring in new blood and new types of players. And so if Donatell does focus on a little bit more of that 3-4 base in his defense, let's go find true outside linebacking, like rush outside linebackers. Like, I'm not saying Anthony Barr couldn't do that. I know we've all talked about that, but that's like, it's been what, 9 years now since like Anthony Barr's been in like that type of role. I'm not saying he can't do it, but to then ask him to completely change what he knows now, and then expect him to be this highly efficient, go get the quarterback type of player. I'd rather just go get players that they can mold themselves, or ones that they already see as like really good fits from this type of scheme with that type of skill set. And so let's bring in the new blood. Let's let the coaching staff mold new players and bring in new energy and a new culture. I think Anthony Barr and Patrick Peterson from a locker room standpoint are great guys. Everything we've heard, nothing but great things. But I also think it's okay to bring in new ideas and new people to restart what that culture looks like from a locker room standpoint. And so I think with the Vikings from a player standpoint, the one thing you can't say, like when we look at like the Wild, for example, there's a lot of rumblings coming out of like what that locker room was like and then they went and turned that locker room over from that leadership standpoint, and it was a good thing. I'm not saying turning over the leadership standpoint in the Vikings locker room is a good thing, but I think it's okay to let those guys move on and find other homes and bring in new people because, yeah, I mentioned all that already. So I'm just okay with, what was don't hire a new GM, a new coach, and a new staff, and then just decide that everything needs to stay the same. Let's try something new for once and just go take a different course of action.
And let these young guys, generate new leadership, right? Like some of these young guys probably have those leadership skills that can take over that locker room and continue to build this culture, but from a youth standpoint, so to speak. And the guys that Donatel and O'Connell want. So I agree, Myles.
Will
nobody should be off the table
there?
Yeah, I think that that makes a lot of sense. I mean, I don't think, looking at the free agents, I don't think many will be back, if any. That's usually the case. Maybe some depth guys, maybe one of the bigger names. But yeah, there's going to be turnover, and yeah, Jordan Berry and I don't know, Tyler Conklin. There's lots of guys that I don't know if they're going to bring back. And I think you have to look at people who are not free agents as well, who are under contract that could be potential cap casualties. Michael Pierce is one that stands out as a place where the Vikings could save some money by moving on. He's only played 7 or 8 games in 2 seasons. And if you're going to a 3-4, I don't think you need both Pierce and Dalvin Tomlinson just from a fit perspective. Tomlinson's contract's a little harder to get off of, so that's why Pierce looks like a potential cap casualty. I don't think that they're necessarily going to go into some sort of fire sale and then strip the roster down to the studs, just based on the continued kind of adamant comments from the Wilfs that they plan on being competitive and that this is not a rebuild. Now, we can debate if that's the right move or not, but I don't think you're going to see like Harrison Smith or Adam Thielen or Dalvin Cook or people like that on the move, even though I think that would be something that is probably worth at least considering. So yeah, I agree with the general take that if you're going to switch up the head coach and the GM, why not, and the coaching staff, why not make some bold moves to switch up the roster as well, and then just kind of go for a different approach.
Yeah, none of the aging expensive vets should be considered untouchable. And that includes anybody for any reason. Yeah. And obviously I think Cousins and Hunter and probably Thielen are the guys that you look at as like obvious, like trade cap or trade guys. Like maybe you trade them, but because you're not likely cutting those guys, but anybody should be on the table at this point. Cause you again, with the reset at, like it's all about cap flexibility, and they have not had cap flexibility for a long time. And the focus in 2022 should be about creating long-term cap flexibility for themselves, not hindering it.
Yeah, Hunter to me would be kind of an easy restructure. I just think like there's only so many defensive players with the upside of Danielle Hunter that you're not going to be able to just find another one easily. It's kind of like the Byron Buxton thing with the Twins. Like, why not take the risk that he stays healthy just because of how incredibly talented he is. So that would be, I think there's a way to restructure him that's already kind of written into his contract that would be able to keep him around.
So, I mean, maybe
real quick, Matt. Real quick. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
We have some really good comments here in the chat that I just want to address real quick, or maybe get Will and Myles or your take, Matt, since you don't often get to give your takes very often on the show. I feel like Kit asked, can we debate what's competitive? Because you could argue that 26 teams were competitive last year. Now, when I think of competitive, I think you're competing for a Super Bowl, not that you're competing for a playoff spot. So Will, do you want to take that? Like, what do you define as competitive if you're running it back, so to speak, to be competitive?
Yeah, I think you don't want to be caught in that like purgatory that the Vikings have been in the past couple of years, where we're hanging around 500. If we make a little run and win a few games in a row, like you sneak into the 6 or 7 seed.
Such a perfect word, by the way.
Yeah, I think you really want to. Everything you do has to be about trying to build sustainable success and open a Super Bowl window where you have a few years to go for it. And then once that window is open, and obviously the best way to do that is to find an elite young quarterback, which is far easier said than done. But everything's got to be about competing for a Super Bowl and not just trying to go 10-7 and sneak in and make an unlikely run. I mean, I think you'd rather do that than bottom out and be terrible, although that could also lead to finding a quarterback. But yeah, to me, competitive is about finding a way to open that window, and then when you realize that's open, do what the Rams did and go all in and just try to capitalize on that window while you have it.
And that leads me to my next comment, actually. Good segue there, Will. So Amani the Great, he asked us a question. Did the LA Rams trade away like 5 years worth of first-round picks to get other teams' star players? So yes, they did do that, right? They traded away for Jalen Ramsey. They traded picks for Von Miller, for actually Odell. They ended up just signing, I think. But there's one other player that they traded for that I'm drawing a blank on right now.
Stafford.
Oh yeah, Matt Stafford. Yeah, there you go. So is that a sustainable way to build a team? Like, obviously you don't see it often. You saw, the Eagles try something similar, right? Back in, I forget what year that was, but they tried to basically load up on free agency on Nnamdi Asomugha and some of these guys to build this super team. It failed. And then you've seen some other teams try to do that, and it hasn't gone well. But the Rams did have success doing it. Your thoughts, just in general?
Yeah, I mean, there's different ways to build a team. Does anybody involved with the Rams have any second thoughts about the way they did it? Absolutely not. They won a Super Bowl. So it's a little bit of a risk, because if it doesn't pan out, you're missing some valuable draft capital, and it places more of an emphasis on hitting on those day 2, day 3 picks. But if you've got the window and you feel like we've got a really good team that is just missing a couple pieces, why not go for it? I think more teams could benefit from that approach.
Well, yeah, I think if your team is right on the cusp, sorry, I was gonna say, if your team's right on the cusp, right? Even like, and again, we tried to do this in essence in 18, right? Like we made a run. We had a great team.
We didn't go all in 2018 though.
But you're right. We didn't, but we did go all in on a quarterback, right? And then obviously, should we have built up the team around that? Should we have gone even more all in around the offensive line to kind of protect the quarterback that we knew had issues with pressure and things like that? So I guess what I'm saying is, I think it's a smart move once you get close. I don't think that you can do that from like where we're at today. We can't just go trade away picks and picks and picks to build a team right now, because we don't have cap space. Our team's not close enough. But if we can, start rebuilding, and you go and, like Will said, grab a young quarterback if you can, that is the high quality quarterback, and build that team around them, then you can start adding those players through trades and through free agency to make the run. And that's how you do it. If you are going to do it that way.
Well, and there's 2 points to that too, Ryan. So when the Rams first started that approach, Jared Goff was on his rookie contract, right? So that's where it started at first. Sean McVay came in, Jared Goff was on his rookie contract. They took a couple of years, but in that second, or like I think it was the second or third year under McVay, they made the Super Bowl. I can't remember at this point, but that's still when Goff was in his rookie contract. So they had more cap flexibility to make some of those all-in moves with the rookie quarterback. And then after that aspect, they also had, guys like Aaron Donald but like my thing, and I think what's important with O'Connell here is you can't make those types of moves right now with O'Connell and Kwesi, because it's just way too early. And to your point, they don't have the type of roster. But with McVay, they had an infrastructure in place of what their overall like philosophy was going to be. The Vikings don't have that identity yet. They need O'Connell to get his footprint on this roster, on this team, and Kwesi as well. Once they can get that like footprint established, maybe in year 2 or year 3, you can start making those types of moves. But like right now, it's not the approach the Vikings should be trying to take to make all in moves. They're not built to do that right now. They were built to do it, and I just don't think. I think leadership fumbled that bag. And I think some of the players fumbled that bag. It's not just the quarterback, but I think a lot of players failed that aspect as well. So it's a whole thing. But the Vikings, just to your point, Ryan, they're not there.
I agree.
Will, any thoughts? I mean,
no,
I feel like that was just
I agree.
I think back and forth between Myles and Ryan.
No, I think I agree. I think you want Kevin and Kwesi to come in and build an identity and establish a culture and build through the draft. I mean, I think people sometimes chalk up the Rams winning to just, they traded for all these guys. They had a ton of homegrown 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th round picks who contributed to that Super Bowl. And that's why they had the flexibility to go add via trade and via free agency. So I think you always want to build through the draft first, figure out the salary cap. Although that's, when you've got Rob Brzezinski, I don't think the cap really is as much of an issue as some people think. As we've seen with the Saints, you can always just kick the can down the road and create space and never really suffer the consequences to a certain extent. So yeah, you want to build through the draft and see if you can either take Kirk Cousins to another level and put him in the right situation, or find another quarterback. And if you get on that right path and you identify that now's the time to go for it, then you do it. But that is not the case with this offseason. There's a long way to go. I agree.
Right. And yes, Devin, we should be trying to trade Kirk for Kyler Murray. Absolutely. All right, keep going. I got my Oklahoma pick in.
Well, I just wanted to talk to you guys a little bit more about the Vikings pending free agents before we wrap this show up here. And there is a different question also I want to ask Will. But Will, I asked this question of Myles, and I just want to get your take. Is there anybody that you're standing on the table for as an impending Vikings free agent that you want to return? Whether it is an Anthony Barr, a Patrick Peterson, I feel like we shift our view towards the defense, since that is the side of the ball that maybe has more free agents. But there are guys like Tyler Conklin, even Dede Westbrook, who proved to be a pretty viable punt returner / wide receiver for. Is there anybody you're standing on the table for, or would want to make a case for to return to the Vikings this season?
Yeah, there's nobody who I would be like, you need to bring this guy back. There's just, the team wasn't good enough last year for you to really make that argument that they have to bring anybody back. I think Dede Westbrook is quite replaceable. Maybe they get BC Johnson back from injury, or draft a guy. And they've got the depth at receiver with Osborne and Smith-Marset. I'll throw out 2 names as guys who could be cheap. And I think could fit on defense. A guy would be Sheldon Richardson, who is obviously aging a little bit, but I think he was the Vikings' best defensive lineman, or maybe best defensive player, down the stretch of the season. They moved him from defensive tackle to defensive end when Everson Griffin, his season ended early, and I thought he was really impressive. He didn't have a ton of pass rush moves. He just kind of bull rushed guys, but he put up a ton of pressures, had a few sacks. I think he could fit well as a 3-4 defensive end on your defensive line if the price is right. And then offensively, I would say Mason Cole is a guy who they could look to bring back, just maybe compete for a spot at center or right guard. He had some good games at both spots this year. I don't know if you don't want to pencil him in as a starter at either spot. You want to bring in competition, but even if he ends up as your 6th offensive lineman, I think he's a pretty solid guy to have as depth. So those would be 2 guys who I think could be fairly cheap that they would consider bringing back, but there's nobody that I would say is like a must return.
I know this is a boring conversation starter, but how do you feel about Greg Joseph and Jordan Berry as far as special teams is concerned?
Yeah, I think they're both just fine. So if Joseph is an exclusive rights free agent, so it's if the Vikings want to tender an offer at the veterans minimum, they can do that, and then he can't negotiate with any other team, or they could choose not to do that. I don't know. We'll see. The coordinators are all talking tomorrow, so I don't think Matt Daniels, the new special teams coordinator, is going to get as many questions as Wes Phillips and Ed Donatel, but we'll see if he has guys that he likes and wants to bring in for those spots. I don't feel super strongly about either of them.
Well, you kind of lead me to my next question, and then we can close out here for any final thoughts. But I saw your tweet today that some of these coordinators are going to be speaking tomorrow at noon. Are you going to be there by the chance? I assume you are.
Yeah, I'll be there
to kind of ask them some questions. Without revealing too much, because I want you to have like your ammo for the pressers. But what are you looking for tomorrow in those pressers for these? I mean, it's fun, it's new, it's exciting for the Vikings franchise to have these new coordinators there. So what are you looking for in tomorrow's press conferences from them?
Yeah, I'll be curious to see what they all have to say. I think Wes Phillips was a good hire as somebody who's worked closely with O'Connell and McVay, and obviously has the impressive family lineage with Wade Phillips and Bum Phillips, and
yes,
just kind of his thoughts on the offensive side of the ball, and Kirk Cousins and where they might want to go. But the most interesting one for sure will be Ed Donatel, who's kind of the senior member of this coaching staff, tons of experience working with Vic Fangio. I'm sure he will get asked about Danielle Hunter and if that's somebody that he views as a guy who could be very valuable in his defensive scheme, and maybe what that might look like, and some of the other pieces that the Vikings have on defense, and just what he kind of values schematically, philosophically from a defensive standpoint. Because for the past 8 years, it's been Mike Zimmer's show on the defensive side of the ball. Now they're switching that up. So I'll be curious to hear what he has to say about this roster and this opportunity that he's getting.
Absolutely. Myles and Ryan, anything that you are looking forward to in tomorrow's presser? By the way, Game Changer 16 said Will needs to take a shot. So Will, I don't know if you have one on hand. It's the end of the show. It's up to you if you want to. But
I don't think I do at the moment, unfortunately. But I would. I would if I did.
Myles, any thoughts on tomorrow? What are you looking for in the press conference with the coordinators?
Honestly, I think Kevin O'Connell kind of touched on it. I think I'm excited to hear a little bit more about like Ed Donatel's vision for the defense. We heard a little bit from O'Connell that like 3-4 is going to be like more like the base, but I'm excited to hear Donatel kind of expand on that, and maybe Will or whoever asks the question about more of like what type of players they're looking for to fit that scheme, if it's significantly different from what they currently have on roster, just because I'm just excited to kind of hear a little bit about that, the defense in itself, because we've gotten so used to what Zim was doing, and I think the players got so used to what was going on in the defense. So I'm excited to hear a little bit of like fresh blood and new ideas from that way. Everything else, like I don't think Wes Phillips or Daniels is going to really say much that's going to sway anything or change anything for us, because like Kevin O'Connell is the one running the offense. Wes Phillips is OC, which is important, but I don't think Wes Phillips is going to tell us anything too different than what O'Connell would.
Well, maybe Daniels goes ahead and goes the trend of the USFL and says, no more punters, right? Like we're gonna pass on punters
we're not punting
this season.
We're not punting.
That could be a fun development tomorrow.
That'd be great. Yeah,
Ryan,
I love that.
How about you, man?
I mean, I don't know what everyone said so far. I mean, there's not really much more to add. I suppose, just from the random, cheesy fan perspective, just the continued feeling of collaboration, culture, all of that. Obviously, again, those are all just feels things right now. They don't really mean much, like Will said earlier. It doesn't necessarily always translate to the field, but it is good to be hearing a consistent message from your total leadership team for the first time in 3-4 years, right? I mean, it seems like the OC has always been on one side, Zimmer's on the other, Zimmer on one foot, Spielman on another. It's the consistency, I think, goes a long way, not just for the fans, but also for the locker room, which again could turn into great on-field results. So some more consistency from that message. I know it doesn't mean much, but it gets me in my feels a little, and gets me more excited.
Absolutely. Any final thoughts tonight from you three gentlemen? Vikings related, Vikings adjacent, NFL offseason, anything at all?
I don't think so. I think we covered some good topics here.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, with
Appreciate
that, I mean,
you guys having me
it's
on.
tough. Well, thank you for coming on, Will. I mean, I know that I know it's busy, and this off season, especially for you, is going to be maybe busier than most, because I mean, it's a completely new culture, new decisions. We don't know what Kwesi's going to do in the draft. I think as this next week ramps up, we'll continue to hear more rumors, which will only be entertaining as far as Vikings Twitter is related, and I'm sure that keeps your job interesting as well. So you will have to key us in on kind of what you're hearing next week. I look forward to the articles that you have coming up. Is there anything in particular that you're working on right now that you wanna share with the people listening?
Nothing specific at the moment. Just tomorrow I'll have stuff from the coordinator pressers. Next week I'll be in Indy, I think Tuesday to Friday for the combine. So awesome. A lot of stuff from there. And then after the combine, I'm actually going to Hawaii. So for a little vacation. So hopefully
Nice.
nothing nothing crazy happens while I'm there. I'll be able to. I'm going to be writing from there. But
Kirk's gone. But when you're gone,
I'm sure Kirk Cousins will be traded while I'm on a plane or something. But yeah, just si.com/NFL/Vikings. Stay tuned. Follow me on Twitter. All lots of stuff coming up.
I've got one question for tomorrow. Ask the coaches how far they are along evaluating the current roster. I'm curious about that.
That's a good one.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. See if I can get that in. I'm sure they'll be asked something along those lines.
And then that's what I'm interested in hearing. Are they going to say, I've looked at all the players, I know where they stand, or if they're, no, I'm still in the process thereof, type deal.
I feel like they're pretty far ahead in that process. I don't think.
Yeah, but they've only been on the job a short time.
Well, then you're told what the evaluation is by some people. But as you head into the scouting combine, I can't believe you're still evaluating your rosters. But I could be wrong. With that being said, Will, I want to thank you for coming on tonight. I know we talked about the chaotic Vikings offseason. I'm going to reach out to you. As you know, Climbing the Pocket has a Vikings draft coverage, runs all weekend long. Would love to get you on there, whether it's a half hour, at some point that weekend, if you can make it work. So we'll touch base there. Myles and Ryan,
sounds good.
Appreciate you for coming back for another week. Again, it's going to be a star-studded lineup for the rest of this Vikings offseason leading up to the draft. Next week, this show has Ben Gessling from the Star Tribune. He will be live next Wednesday evening at 8 p.m. Central. We'll talk to him about some of the scouting combine stuff, any rumors that are swirling, because God knows there's going to be a bunch of stuff for this Minnesota Vikings team. So appreciate you all coming here. And Dave, I'll hand it off to you to send this show off.
Well, tomorrow night, hopefully, will be Viking hot takes. Both Eric and Flip are back in town. I have not heard from them, however. If not, Saturday you'll have two old bloggers, and then we start all over again. Until then, what do we say?
Skol Vikes!
Skol Vikings! Thank you for watching or listening. As always, if you like, subscribe, and ring the bell for notifications. And if you're listening to the podcast, please rate us on your favorite aggregator. Skol, everybody!